My name is Maya Rivers, and during my grandfather's will reading, my family laughed when I was left with nothing but an envelope, while they inherited millions. They thought I'd been forgotten. But inside that envelope was a secret that changed everything. A plane ticket to Monaco, a hidden fortune worth over $1 billion, and the keys to an empire my grandfather built in silence. Months later, I owned my father's company. Their luxury estates were beneath my hilltop mansion, and the family that mocked me now worked for me. Where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for more. My grandfather's funeral should have been an ode to a life well lived. Instead, it became a stage for greed. While the hymn still echoed, my family hovered over his legacy like buyers at an auction. By the time we reached the will reading, the only thing I expected was basic dignity. What I received was an envelope. We assembled in Harold Bennett's downtown office. Mahogany walls, oil paintings, the whole theater of old money. My mother, Caroline, sat rigid in a black suit, patting her dry eyes with a tissue that was clearly more prop than necessity. My father, Stephen, watched the second hand on his watch as if it were a countdown to his next upgrade. My brother, Liam, sprawled like he'd already won something. And my cousin, Tessa, whispered figures to her husband as though she could multiply the future by sheer will. Bennett cleared his throat. To my son, Stephen Rivers, I leave the family shipping company and all related assets. My father's smile was instantaneous. That business could fetch $30 million, easily. To my daughter-in-law, Caroline Rivers, I bequeath the Napa Valley estate, including its furnishings and art. Mother's first real smile since the funeral. That property alone was worth $20+ million. To my grandson, Liam Rivers, I leave my vintage automobile collection and the Manhattan penthouse. Liam's fist clenched under the table. Those cars? Priceless to the right bidder. To my granddaughter, Tessa Grant, I leave the yacht Ariadne and the Martha's Vineyard summer home. Tessa's eyes gleamed. Her husband squeezed her hand. Bennett paused, then looked at me. To my granddaughter, Maya Rivers, I leave this envelope. The room exhaled, half laughter, half pity. Mother patted my knee. I'm sure it's heartfelt, darling. Something meaningful. Her tone made meaningful sound like a consolation prize. Liam leaned in with a smirk. Maybe it's a coupon. Tessa offered a sympathetic shrug that wasn't sympathetic at all. He always adored you. I'm sure it's sweet. I stood, the leather chair sighing behind me. Excuse me. Their soft laughter followed me down the hall like perfume you can't scrape off. In the mirrored elevator doors, my reflection looked steadier than I felt. I slit the envelope. Inside, a first-class ticket to Monaco dated for next week, and a note in Grandfather Edmund Carter's unmistakable hand. Trust activates on your 25th birthday, Starling. Time to claim what's yours. My breath stuttered. There was also a heavy card engraved in gold. Prince Laurent de Monaco, private secretary. On the back, in my grandfather's writing, he manages your trust. A statement from Banque Privée Helvétique lay behind it, addressed to Maya R. Rivers Trust. I counted the zeros 3 times. $347,000. By the time I reached my apartment, the city felt unreal, like someone had peeled back the sky and shown me machinery. I called the bank. After an obstacle course of verifications, a precise voice assured me the trust had been created when I was 16, investments managed for a decade, and the activation timed to my 25th birthday. But I never signed. As the settler, your grandfather established everything. Your consent wasn't required as a minor, the banker explained. Specifics will be presented by Prince Laurent when you arrive. I ended the call and just stared. The family group chat pinged with photos, Liam's car catalogs, Tessa's beach house inspirations. Not one message asked, what was in your envelope? The next morning, over toast and condescension, I mentioned Monaco. Father choked on his coffee. Monaco? With your salary? The ticket's already covered, I said. Mother's laugh was feather-light and cutting. Monaco is for people with real money, sweetheart. You'll feel out of place. Maybe she'll snag a few Instagram shots, Liam added. Show her students what a Bentley looks like. I swallowed the heat rising in my throat and reached for something colder, the note, the statement, the weight of a different life pressing into my palm. Granddad had his reasons, I said softly. That afternoon I researched. Prince Laurent wasn't a headline caricature. He was an established financial coordinator for ultra-high net worth families. News profiles put him at the hub of billions. The night before my flight, Mother called again, urging prudence. Father advised I keep a low profile. I packed my quietest dress and my loudest certainty. First class felt like leaving gravity. The attendant greeted me as Miss Rivers and draped warmth over the title. Champagne arrived. I barely touched it. I kept tracing the sentence in my mind. Time to claim what's yours. Money that size wasn't just comfort, it was choice. At Nice Côte d'Azur, a driver waited with a sign, Miss Maya Rivers, beneficiary, Rivers Global Trust. The title almost stole my knees out from under me. As we curved along the coast, the Mediterranean flashed like liquid foil. Monaco wasn't a city so much as a polished jewel set into cliffs. Yachts stacked like myths. The Casino de Monte Carlo blinking gold under the sun. Streets that smelled like citrus and money. We didn't stop at tourist entrances. The car slipped through a private gate into a courtyard I'd only ever seen on magazine covers. Inside, history lined the corridors. Tapestries, portraits, the weight of centuries. The driver opened a door. Miss Rivers, your appointment. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the sea. A desk the size of my living room anchored the space. Prince Laurent rose, impeccably tailored, the kind of ease that grows where power is inherited and effort is expected. Maya, he said, offering his hand with a faint, reassuring smile. I'm Laurent. Thank you for coming. I took the chair opposite. I have 100 questions, and I have complete answers. He opened a leather folder. Your grandfather, Edmund Carter, was both my friend and a singular strategist. He built the Rivers Global Trust at your 16th year, with instructions that you would learn ordinary life first, work, responsibility, before extraordinary resources would be revealed. Ordinary, I repeated, thinking of classroom budgets and glue sticks, of fixing printers at 7:45 a.m. He wanted you to see people clearly. Laurent's gaze was kind but frank. We see others best before they see our balance sheet. He turned the first page. Your trust holds controlling interest in several hospitality and gaming assets. The Bay d'Azur Resort Casino here in Monaco, annual net around $40 million. The Aurora Grand in Las Vegas, approximately $145 million net yearly. Significant commercial real estate in London, Tokyo, Sydney. Additional minority stakes across energy, logistics, and technology. The words blurred. I grabbed the arm of my chair. And taxes? Properly structured, vetted, and paid. Your annual stipend of $60,000 was intentionally modest, precisely to keep attention low while you established your own identity. He tapped a separate packet. Your CPA, investment managers, and legal team have been operating under strict privacy covenants. A laugh, half incredulity, half relief, escaped me. So the quiet deposit that made my rent manageable? Trust distributions, Laurent said. Calibrated to comfortable teacher, not heiress, your grandfather insisted. I thought of Granddad Edmund, teaching me chess every summer, asking my opinion about imaginary hotels, guest satisfaction versus exclusivity, the pros and cons of valet parking. I'd thought it was play. It wasn't play. It was training. How much am I? I could barely say the word. Net of liabilities, mark to market as of this morning, Laurent said, glancing at a printed sheet. Approximately $1.2 billion. Something in me went very still, like a lake when the wind drops. And my family? He measured his reply. Edmund suspected they might reposition you if they knew. He wanted you to witness their unvarnished behavior before you held the leverage to change it. I saw the will reading again, the chuckles, the hand on my knee, the casual contempt. I nodded. Tonight, Laurent said gently, I suggest sleep. Tomorrow, we'll tour your Monaco property. Then we'll fly to Las Vegas to brief you at the Aurora Grand. After that, we'll outline governance and options. The Bay d'Azur felt like walking into a dream I owned but had never entered. Jean-Paul Maréchal, the general manager, walked me past the azure pool and marble lobby. Occupancy has held at 94% for 3 years, he said. Your trust has been a model owner, selective with capital improvements, unwavering about service standards. From the presidential terrace, the Mediterranean burned blue to the horizon. I tried to stitch the teacher I'd been to the owner I apparently was. They didn't quite meet in the middle, not yet. That night, back in my suite, the family group chat pinged. Liam posting a lineup of vintage Porsches, Tessa weighing marble versus oak for her Martha's Vineyard Reno. Father shared an article about smart money management after a windfall. No one asked about my envelope. No one even remembered I had one. I texted back to Father when he asked about my vacation, educational. Laurent met me the next morning on the tarmac beside a jet whose leather smelled like quiet power. "You'll be comfortable," he said, as if comfort were the point, not the symbolism. Monaco slipped behind us. The Atlantic curved. Las Vegas rose like an equation solved by neon. At the Aurora Grand, Nadia Ortiz, the property head, laid out numbers that made my heart pound for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. Revenue streams from gaming, suites, restaurants, shows, cogs meshing in a machine that printed certainty. My team, Grace Ito, tax, Raj Patel, investments, and Elena Morozova, legal, appeared on a video wall. They spoke in clean, competent sentences about compliance, risk, and runway. When they finished, I found a new voice. I want to understand not just what we own, but why. What's the thesis behind each asset? The moat, the churn, the tail risk? Raj's smile flickered. Spoken like Edmund. That night, I ate beside a window that looked over the strip and called Laurent. "What happens when I go home?" "You choose who learns what and when." His tone sharpened almost imperceptibly, but a caution. First moves matter. I pictured my father's debt-heavy shipping firm. On paper, it looked strong. Inside, it wheezed. I heard Granddad in my head. Never play the piece the board expects. Play the position you want to create. What if I acquired Rivers Maritime? I asked. Laurent didn't blink. You're considering your father's company as your first major act? I'm considering saving it, on terms that protect its people and its culture, because otherwise an opportunist will pick the bones clean. And secrecy? Necessary, I said. I remembered the laughter, the pat on my knee. They respect what they can count, not what they can't comprehend. Laurent's pause felt like approval. Then we proceed quietly, a neutral holding entity, cash offer, swift close. You'll need a domestic partner to manage diligence. Loop in Nadia, I said, and start the analysis. When the jet lifted back toward Oregon 2 days later, I watched desert turn to patchwork fields and thought of chessboards and classrooms, of envelopes and empires. I could land, walk into my parents' dining room, and drop the truth like a chandelier. Or I could do what Edmund taught me, set the board. I closed my eyes and saw my grandfather's hands over a chessboard, his favorite grin, the one he wore when he'd traded a knight for tempo and I hadn't yet seen why. You don't win by shouting checkmate, he used to say. You win by making it inevitable. I opened my eyes, calm and absolute. I knew my next move. Back in Portland, everything looked smaller. My apartment, my car, even the skyline I'd once thought elegant. It felt like watching my old life through a keyhole. While the world saw a teacher with a modest paycheck, I now carried the knowledge of a billion-dollar empire in my phone. I'd barely unpacked when my phone rang. The screen flashed Sarah Dalton, Laurent's associate in Las Vegas. The preliminary report on Rivers Maritime is ready, she said. It's as you suspected, profitable but drowning in debt. Overleveraged after expansion, surviving on month-to-month liquidity. And the employees? Stable but anxious. If the wrong investor buys them out, layoffs are inevitable. I stared out my window at the streetlights flickering below. Let's prepare an offer, generous, clean, and fast. Anonymous through one of our shells. Make sure it's impossible for my father to trace back to me. Understood, Sarah said. We'll move through Neptune International Holdings, a Swiss-based entity, all cash. When the call ended, I sat in silence for a long moment. For the first time in my life, I held real leverage over the same people who had laughed at me like I was the family's afterthought. But this wasn't just revenge, it was strategy. Grandpa Edmund had taught me the difference. That evening, Mother called about family dinner. We're all meeting tomorrow, she said lightly. Your father wants you to help us organize everyone's inheritance paperwork. You're good with computers. I smiled at the irony. Sure, Mom, I'll bring my laptop. When I arrived the next evening, the house buzzed with excitement. Liam was showing off a photo of a red Aston Martin he planned to buy. Tessa scrolled through design boards for her vineyard home. Dad discussed business expansions with that confident air he wore like a tailored suit. "There she is," Tessa announced as I walked in. "Our world traveler. How was Monaco? Did you get some photos with yachts in the background?" "It was educational," I said, sliding into my usual seat. Liam snorted. "Educational? Come on, Monaco's for the 1%. You probably stuck out like a tourist." I sipped my water. "You'd be surprised how adaptable people can be." Dad raised his glass. "To your grandfather, who gave us all something special." Everyone toasted except me. I simply smiled and folded my hands. "So," I said softly, "how's the shipping company?" Dad brightened. "We're expanding routes. Might acquire smaller regional lines soon. It's doing well." "And cash flow?" His smile faltered. "Tight, but manageable." "Working capital reserves?" I pressed. The room fell quiet. Mother laughed, breaking the tension. "Oh, Maya, sweetheart. Let's not bore everyone with business talk. Your father knows what he's doing." I let it drop, but I'd seen the flicker of truth in Dad's eyes, worry buried under pride. Later that night, Sarah called again. Offers drafted. $45 million, 30% above valuation. Includes employment guarantees and management retention for 3 years. And if they refuse? They can't afford to. They'll run out of liquidity within 6 months. "Good," I said quietly. "Deliver it Tuesday morning." Tuesday came. By noon, my phone rang. "Maya," Dad's voice crackled, strained. "We got a buyout offer from some Swiss investment group, came out of nowhere. They're offering $45 million. "That's amazing," I said, feigning surprise. "Do you think you'll take it?" "I don't know. It's almost too good. They want an answer by Friday." "Maybe they see potential you don't," I suggested gently. "Grandpa always said opportunity doesn't knock twice." He hesitated. "Maybe. Can you come Thursday? I want everyone's input." "Of course," I said, smiling as I hung up. Thursday's dinner felt different. The air was taut with possibility. Financial papers were spread across the dining table, replacing the usual silverware polish and candles. Dad pointed at the documents. "Neptune International Holdings," he said, tapping the logo. "A Swiss consortium. They've been acquiring logistics companies worldwide. Offer is $45 million, all cash." Liam whistled. "That's insane. Take it, Dad." Tessa nodded eagerly. "You'd be free to retire early. You've earned it." Dad frowned. "I'm not sure I'm ready to give up the company." I leaned in, studying the terms I'd written myself. "These are solid," I said. "They'll retain all employees, keep your management team, and preserve operations for 3 years. That's rare." Dad blinked at me. "You seem to know a lot about acquisitions." I shrugged. "Grandpa and I talked about business sometimes." Mother smiled indulgently. "Darling, you always did love playing pretend CEO." Dad rubbed his temple. "Still, I can't decide." "Then let the numbers decide," I said. "You've always taught me good business means recognizing when to sell before the market turns." He looked at me long and hard. "You sound just like your grandfather." I smiled. "Then you know what to do." By Friday afternoon at 4:47 p.m., Dad signed the papers. By 5:30, I owned Rivers Maritime. Sarah called an hour later. "Transfer confirmed. Neptune now controls the company. Smooth as silk." "Good," I said. "Keep everything as is. Same management, same staff. My father remains as general manager." "You want him to stay on?" "Yes," I said. "Let him feel the relief of stability before he realizes who provided it." That weekend, Dad called. "We're having a lunch to celebrate the sale. You'll come, right?" Wouldn't miss it. The celebration took place at their country club. Crystal glasses, linen napkins, laughter. They toasted to smart business decisions and new beginnings. "To your grandfather," Dad said, glass raised. "He'd have been proud of what we've done." I touched my glass to his. "To new beginnings," I said softly, my lips curling at the double meaning. The following week, I met with Laurent on a video call. "So," he said with a faint smile, "the acquisition went smoothly." "Perfectly," I replied. "He thinks he sold to Europeans expanding their maritime footprint." "And how do you feel?" I thought about it. like I've just taken the first move in a long chess game. He chuckled. Check or checkmate? Neither, just positioning my pieces. Over the next month, my life shifted again. Board meetings, investment memos, my days filled with data and decisions. Meanwhile, my family basked in their smaller fortunes, oblivious to the empire their poor relation quietly commanded. But I wanted more than quiet satisfaction. I wanted to stop living small. So I called Patricia Wells, Portland's top luxury realtor. Show me your best properties, I said. By dusk, I'd toured a dozen multi-million-dollar homes, each more extravagant than the last. But when we reached the Westfield estate, 20 acres overlooking the city, it felt right. Glass, stone, and symmetry. The kind of view that whispered power. Patricia's voice faltered as I spoke. Full asking price, cash. Close in 2 weeks. Miss Rivers, she stammered, that's an $18 million property. I know, I said, signing the paperwork. I'll have the funds wired by morning. That night, Laurent called to confirm the transfer. Congratulations, Maya, quite the statement. It's not a statement, I said. It's a stage. Moving day came 2 weeks later. Trucks lined the circular driveway. I stood in the foyer directing decorators when my phone buzzed. Dad. Maya, he said slowly, your mother's standing in front of the Westfield estate. You didn't give her the wrong address, did you? No, I said, smiling. That's exactly where I am. What? I'm not outside the estate, Dad. I'm inside it. Silence. Then, we're coming up. Through the towering windows, I watched their small sedan wind up the hill. When they stepped into the marble foyer, their faces mirrored the disbelief I'd once worn at that will reading. Maya, Mother whispered, how did you buy this? Simple, I said, gesturing around. I made an offer. An $18 million offer? Dad demanded. 19, I corrected. There was a bidding war. He stared, speechless. You're a teacher, Mother said. Teachers don't buy mansions. Former teacher, I said. I resigned yesterday. They followed me through the house, the chandelier, the curved staircase, the kitchen glinting with imported marble. Finally, in the master suite, Dad turned to me. Explain this, now. Remember Grandpa's envelope? I asked. He frowned. That letter? It wasn't just a letter, I said quietly. It was a key. Their confusion deepened as I laid out the truth. The trip, the bank, the trust, the billions. When I finished, they could only stare. You're saying you're a billionaire, Dad murmured. $1.3 billion as of yesterday's close. Mother sank into a chair. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at them evenly. When would you have listened? During the will reading when you laughed? Or afterward, when you told me Monaco was for people with real money? Maya, Dad began, we didn't mean... Yes, you did, I said softly. You meant every word. He exhaled, shoulders sagging. Fine, but that still doesn't explain one thing. What's that? He met my eyes. Did you really buy my company? I nodded. For $45 million, which was generous. He went pale. Why? Because I could. Because you didn't even ask if I might want it. His voice broke. That company is my life's work. Was, I said gently. Now it's my business. He stepped toward me, anguish on his face. Sell it back, please. I shook my head. It's not for sale. Maya. Dad, the deal was legal, fair, and profitable. You taught me that's what business is. For a moment, silence stretched between us, thick, fragile. Then I turned toward the window, watching the city spread out below like a chessboard. When you're ready to see me as family, not failure, I said quietly, we'll talk. I left them standing in the doorway, dwarfed by the home of the daughter they had once pitied. 3 days passed before I heard from my family again. The silence was almost peaceful. I spent those days setting up new business accounts, arranging meetings with my foundation's legal team, and walking through the Westfield Gardens at sunrise, each moment reminding me that I was finally living life on my terms. Then the inevitable call came. Liam. What the hell is going on, Maya? His voice was tight with disbelief. Mom and Dad told me everything. The house, the company. You? Billionaire? Are they losing it? I stirred my coffee slowly, savoring his panic. It's true. How is that even possible? Grandpa left you an envelope. Yes. And that envelope contained the key to everything he built. There was a pause, heavy and awkward. We need a family meeting, he said finally. Tonight. No, I said simply. We already had our family meeting at the will reading. Remember? When you all laughed. Maya, come on, we didn't know. Exactly. You didn't care to know. He started to argue, but I hung up. 10 minutes later, Tessa called, then mother, then father. I ignored everyone. By evening, the inevitable happened. My security system chimed. Cameras showed all 4 of them at the gate, standing together, uncertain, like ghosts from an older, smaller world. I pressed the intercom. Yes? Maya? Mom's voice trembled. We need to talk. Did you make an appointment? This isn't funny, Dad said sharply. We're family. I hesitated. The old me wanted to open the gate immediately. But the woman I'd become, the one who'd learned self-respect the hard way, knew better. You can come in, I said finally, but there are rules. You listen. You don't interrupt. You don't make demands. You acknowledge that everything I own is rightfully mine. If you can't agree, you can turn around. There was silence, then Dad's voice again. All right, your way. I pressed the button. The gates opened with a slow, mechanical hum. When they stepped into the foyer, their faces were a mixture of awe and discomfort. The marble floors reflected the chandelier's light like a mirror. The air itself seemed to remind them that they'd underestimated me. I gestured toward the living room, its walls of glass opening to the city skyline. Sit. They did. Dad cleared his throat. Maya, we owe you an apology. For what? I asked evenly. For not understanding what your grandfather intended. For misjudging your inheritance. That's not the apology I need, I said quietly. You're sorry because you miscalculated the numbers, not because of how you treated me. Mom leaned forward, wringing her hands. Honey, we never meant to treat you badly. We were just surprised. Surprised that I wasn't poor? Her face flushed. That's not fair. Fair? I let out a short laugh. You laughed at me, Mom. You told me Grandpa didn't love me as much. You all acted like I was a joke. Now you're in my house trying to rewrite history. Tessa spoke up, defensive. We were wrong, okay? But buying your father's company, don't you think that's a little extreme? I turned to her. No. What's extreme is being ignored my entire life. What's extreme is being dismissed, pitied, and underestimated. I didn't buy Dad's company out of spite. I bought it because I could do better. Dad's jaw tightened. So this is revenge? This is justice, I replied. And business. You taught me those aren't always different. The silence that followed felt like oxygen returning after a storm. Finally, Dad said softly, Then what do you want from us? I stood and walked to the window. The city glittered below, endless and indifferent. Acknowledgement, I said. A public one. The same way you flaunted your inheritances, I want you to acknowledge how wrong you were about me. Publicly. Tessa's eyes widened. You want us to what? Post about it? Yes. Social media, interviews, however you like. But it has to be public. People deserve to know that the forgotten granddaughter wasn't forgotten at all. That's humiliating, Liam muttered. I looked at him. Now you know how it feels. And if we do this? Dad asked carefully. Will you consider selling the company back to me? I smiled faintly. I'll consider it. No promises. The next week, the apologies began appearing. Dad's statement ran in the Portland Business Journal. I misjudged my daughter, Maya Rivers. Her acumen, integrity, and vision embody the best of our family's legacy. I deeply regret any words or actions that suggested otherwise. Mother's post on Facebook read, To my daughter Maya, I'm sorry for underestimating you. I was wrong, and I couldn't be prouder of the woman you've become. Liam and Tessa followed with Instagram posts, both brief and nervous. But it was enough. The story caught attention. Local media began whispering about the mysterious billionaire educator turned tycoon. My phone buzzed with interview requests I politely declined. Meanwhile, Rivers Maritime continued running smoothly under Dad's management. I'd kept every employee, improved salaries, and funded new vessels. The only difference was ownership. Now Dad reported to a board that reported to me. Irony, as it turned out, could be profitable. 6 months later, I attended my first family dinner since the confrontation. The atmosphere was different, quieter, humbler, but somehow warmer. During dessert, Dad set down his glass. "Maya, I need to tell you something about the company." I looked up, guarded. "What about it?" "The new ownership has been incredible. I have resources I never dreamed of. We've expanded routes, improved logistics, secured new contracts. The employees are thriving." I nodded. "Good. That was the point." He smiled faintly. "I realize now you didn't buy it to punish me. You bought it to save it." "Both," I said honestly, "but saving it mattered more." Mom reached across the table, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "Do you forgive us?" I hesitated. "I understand you," I said finally. "That's not the same as forgiveness, but it's close." Tessa exhaled, relieved. "That's something." Liam, unusually quiet, spoke next. "I've been thinking about what you said, about earning respect. I want to work for one of your companies. Start at the bottom, no special treatment." I studied him, searching for arrogance, and found sincerity instead. "Then you'll start in logistics, warehouse operations, 6-month contract, earn your way up." He nodded. "Deal." Later that night, Dad and I stood on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "Not because of the money. Because you proved all of us wrong and did it with grace." I smiled. "Grandpa would say it was just good strategy." He chuckled. "You sound like him more every day." "I learned from the best," I replied. When they left that night, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel triumphant anymore, just steady, whole. A year later, I stood aboard my private yacht, the Legacy, as it glided down the Columbia River. The water shimmered with sunset light, and the skyline stretched behind me like the closing chapter of a long story. In a single year, I'd become one of Portland's most influential investors. I owned hotels, real estate, a maritime empire, and a charitable foundation named after my grandfather, the Edmund Carter Foundation for Educational Excellence. That morning, we'd awarded a $100 million grant to expand science and technology programs in underfunded schools. My foundation's motto etched into the plaque read, "The greatest inheritance is belief in one's own worth." As I prepared the press statement, I wrote one final paragraph myself. When I was younger, I thought the world decided my value. I was wrong. The world only reflects the value you see in yourself. My grandfather gave me the gift of discovering that truth. That evening, the family gathered once again, this time at my estate, for our now monthly dinner. We talked about work, travel, and life. No jealousy, no competition, just conversation. Dad raised his glass. To family, and to seeing clearly. I smiled. To learning from the past. As we toasted, I caught my reflection in the window. The same woman, but not the same person. The one who'd been overlooked was gone. The one who'd learned to value herself had taken her place. Later that night, after everyone had left, I stood alone in my office. The city lights shimmered below, the same ones I'd once looked up to from a small apartment. I whispered softly, "You were right, Grandpa. Sometimes you have to let them underestimate you. It makes the victory sweeter." And for the first time, the laughter that filled the room was mine.